today's task is to make the binder tag right here. So let's look at the constraints. Your constraints, 25 millimeters, that would be your x-axis, 70 millimeters would be your y, and 6 millimeters is your z height. Now again, the x and the y can be interchangeable. Your maximum is 70, but you could go less than that. I would not go less than 25 here. So let me show you. We're going to go to Tinker. We're going to click Create and make sure we're creating a 3D design. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a box. I'm going to go ahead and scale this box down to 6 millimeters. And that was my z height. Again, that is the one in the middle. I'm going to change this. I can click 70 there, click on this one, and I can go 25 there. So that, again, is the maximum size there. But I actually want this to be rounded over here, so I'm going to bring in a cylinder. I'm going to place it on a work plane. A couple things I'm going to do first. I'm going to click this down arrow and get these sides. If I zoom in on the cylinder, I can actually see that these are straight lines here. Okay? There's 48 straight lines or rectangles to make this cylinder. If I crank that up to 128, you'll notice it looks much more smooth, so that'll give me a better print. I need to change this diameter to match the width of my box. Now that is 25, 25. Okay, go ahead and change this to a z height of 6. I'm going to select both of them just by clicking and dragging, so I get this red box. Anything that that red box touches will be selected. I'm going to hit the L key, which again is the Align tool right up here, the Align tool. I want these to be centered on this axis here. So if I click this one, you'll notice that that orange cylinder will move up, and if I look at it from this direction, I will see that they are now aligned, at least in that direction. If I hover over, it will show me what's going to happen. That is not where I want that circle, so I'm going to hit Command-Z or undo. Okay. What I want to do now is I'm just going to hit the right arrow on the keyboard, so that way I make sure it only goes on the x-axis. And I'm going to zoom in, and all I'm looking for is that this orange cylinder runs into this red rectangle at this one point. If I go over here a little bit more, you'll start to see this little gap. Or same thing if I go the other direction. I don't really want that. I'm trying to make it as clean as possible. Now if you're having some trouble getting it to line up exactly, you can change this from 1 millimeter down to 0.1 millimeter, and you'll notice that it now moves much smaller increments. Okay, we just need to get it somewhat close. But if I look at this dot on the selection, that is right in the middle of my cylinder. So if that dot is lined up with the edge of the red there, I know that the middle of this circle, or the exact diameter, is now in line with the edge of the red. So once I have that, I can go ahead and let's see, I can do some math here. This is 25, which means half of that is going to be 12.5. So I've added 12.5 millimeters here, which means if I come over here, I need to subtract 12.5. Well, 70 minus 12.5 is going to be 57.5. And just to check that, if I now add both of those together, this should now read 70. So I got rid of 12.5 over here, but I added it over here. All right, so once I have that looking like that, I'm going to go ahead and combine them by hitting this group button up here or hitting Command-G on the keyboard. Okay. Actually, let's go back a step. I'm going to hit undo and do one quick thing. So I'm going to use this shape to make the cutout on the inside. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. You can Command-C, Command-V, and that's going to paste it. You can hit Command-D, and notice how it flashed. Now I know that there is another object right in that same line. I can also click on it and hit this button here, which is the duplicate button as well. So lots of ways to get the same object. I'm going to hit the duplicate button, and then I'm going to lift it up a little bit here, just so it's out of the way, so I can make some changes to it. I'm going to switch this back to 1 millimeter. All right, this is going to be a hole, and this is going to be smaller. So I'm actually going to make this, we're going to take off 4. So that would be 53.5, that direction. And then the other direction, since it's 25, let me zoom over. That's going to then be 21. So I have made this box 4 smaller. So I've got 4 over here and I've got 4 over here. We'll see how that lines up in a second. Now that I've done that, I can go ahead and group these two bottom ones. So again, I'm just barely, anything that's inside of that rectangle, I don't have to put the entire shape inside of the rectangle, just enough so that anything I touch is now selected. I've noticed I've got 2 things selected here. So I'm going to group those, and that is the group button or Command-G. All right, so now I've got that shape. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to align these 2 things. So I'm going to select everything, I'm going to hit that L key again, and I want to make sure that I'm aligned here. Okay. I also am going to make sure that I'm aligned over here. Okay. If you remember, we made it 4 millimeters smaller, which means that would give me a 2 millimeter border here and a 2 millimeter border over here, along with 2 millimeters on either side, top to bottom as well. So I changed this snap grid back to 1, and if I'm looking at it from this direction, my left arrow on the keyboard will move this top box left. If I move it 1, that's moving it 1 millimeter. So if I click that left arrow again, that has now moved it 2 millimeters. So this gap here is now 2 millimeters. This gap here from front to back, that's 2 millimeters, and that there is 2 millimeters as well. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and make this z height of 4. Okay, and all I'm going to do with this now is I am going to align it to the top. So I'm going to hit that L key, and I'm going to use, okay, so notice how if I hover over this, it's actually bringing everything up here. If I do this, it's bringing everything to the middle, and then this is actually going to bring the box, the gray box down here to the bottom. So I don't want any of those. So what I want is I don't want this to move. So now that I've got my align tool, I'm going to select this red box. I'm just going to click on it. So notice what that did to these boxes over here. Okay, these dots got smaller, and now the red one is not moving as I hover over. So that means this is now the master, and this will align to it. So I'm going to align it to the top. Okay, so I've got that gray box. You can kind of see this little shaded area right there. So it's now touching the top, but it's not touching the bottom because it's only 4 millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and group this now. And what that did is that made a little shell. All right, so now I've got a little shell. Okay, and this is where we're going to put our name. Before we do that, we're going to make a little hole. So I'm going to change this to 3 millimeters. I'm going to change this to 3 millimeters. And now, again, we're going to use our align tool. I want this in the center. Okay, and then I'm just going to eyeball it this direction. I want to make sure that there is enough material here that it's not fragile, but I don't want it to where I put it like this, because then it's going to run into my binder or the key ring and things. I don't want too much material here. So something like that. Basically the same width of this circle kind of in there should look good. All right, should work just fine. So I just want to make sure I got that aligned back in the center. All right, now I need to make sure that this goes all the way to the bottom. Okay, so I see that gray circle there. That means it does go all the way through the bottom. If it's not going through the bottom, what's probably happening is this was lifted up and it's not actually touching the ground, which means it won't go all the way through. Okay, so I'm going to drop that back down. If it's not touching the ground, you can hit the D key and it will then drop it. Okay, if I raise this up and I hit that D key, it automatically drops it to the work plane. Okay, so I can group those. And now I've got the base of my binder tag. I'm going to use the text tool. You could get fancy and you could use other methods to make your letters if you want, but for this one you can use the text tool. You could also use the scribble tool, or if you wanted to try the sketch tool, you could do that. I will say that you need to change your font to either sans or sans mono. That's going to get rid of these serifs. Okay, these things on the side here are serifs. You'll also notice that part of your letters are much thinner than other part of your letters using these other language or other fonts. So we're either doing sans or sans mono. They're basically the same. You want to make this text as large as possible in this box, but you've got some options here. You don't have a lot of room to make a lot of words. Okay. Now, let me go back a step. Notice how that was green, right? If I take my text and I drag it, okay, let me go here. You can see how the orange is not touching the blue. That means I'm using the inside of my binder tag as the work plane. If I put this over here, you'll see that that text is all the way on the ground. It doesn't really matter which way you do this. You just need to pay attention to the math. Okay? If I put my text on here, you'll notice that my constraint said my z height maximum was 6. Okay? So, because we cut down 4 millimeters, that means we're starting at a z height. Okay, so this is off the ground 2 millimeters, which means I can add 4 millimeters to this, which is going to put my text at the same height as the binder tag. That way it's protected. Okay. So again, we're going to change that. Now, if I drop that all the way down, okay, I hit that D key. Notice that it's all the way on the ground now. Then I could change this number to 6. Okay. Either way, it's going to print the same. It just depends on your math there on what you're doing. So I'm going to go ahead, put this back up here. So I'm just using that work plane tool and then hitting that D key so that it jumped up to the top there. And then I'm going to change this down to 4 millimeters. Okay. So I've got some options here. You can adjust your text by using these white and black. I wouldn't use the white ones, I'd use the black ones, okay, to get it where you want. You can have your text go all the way to the edge. You could leave a border, it doesn't matter. But one thing to do to make it a little bolder is to add a bevel here. Okay, you'll see how that will kind of start to round the edges on the segments down here. Kind of starts to round that edge a little bit. Just makes it look a little nicer. Okay, so you can play with the bevel, you can play with the segments. You can do one before the other and see if it makes any difference. Okay, but you've got some options there. One thing I will say, if you're, let me get this out of here so you can see what's going on. Oh, cancel. All right, so I'm going to make this text a little smaller. Let's say you wanted to put like your first and last name. So you're going to give yourself some room. I'm going to duplicate that text. You probably don't have you don't have enough room. It's not going to be very large if you like make this bottom text, you know, not touching here. So what you could do to overlap these, to make these words a little larger, is you can actually add some contrast. If I leave it just like this, when this all groups together, you won't be able to see the separation or the contrast between these letters, so it just kind of looks a little bit weirder. But one way to make that look better is if I take this bottom text, and instead of 4, if I make this 3, I'm going to create some separation here by having different heights. Now I could do this with every single letter. You just want to make sure that you don't go above the line of the tag, which is again 4 millimeters from this inside base, and you don't want this to be, you know, non-existent at 0.1, because that's not going to do anything. So you want to just create some separation with your letters, and then when it prints, you'll be able to read it much easier, but you still get a lot of room. So you can still make these letters nice and big, but you have some overlap that is still easy to read. Because again, this will be printed in one color. So it doesn't matter what color you design in, that is not the color it will be printed. Most likely these are going to be printed in white, because that is what is currently on the machine. Your final steps, once you've got your text, you go up here to click Export. You're going to click STL. Again, you want to make sure everything in the design is selected. If I only have this letter of text selected, notice how it says the selected shape. Well, that's only going to send that word text to Schoology. Well, that's not what we want. We want everything in the design. So either make sure you have nothing selected, but if I have something random on the work plane here, okay, even though that's not selected, when I hit export, it's going to send everything in the design, which means this cylinder would show up. So we don't want that. So either clear off your work plane or make sure you have selected what you want to send. Okay, so only the selected shapes, everything in design, that is the same thing for what I've got here. So before we export, make sure that this up here has the title of what we did. And then you're going to put your last name on it. So this is a binder tag. My last name is Gear. Spell it correctly. Put capital letters where they go. Put some effort into it. Then I'm ready to export. Okay, just talked about all these options up here at the top. And then we hit the STL button. Once this downloads, again, it might ask you the first time if you want to download from TinkerCAD, just click that Allow button. And then now I have this. This is in my Downloads folder. When I go to Schoology, I can now upload BinderTag gear.stl, and it will get 3D printed, as long as it is done correctly. Good luck designing today.